All right, thank you so much. So I'm going to kick things off and let people sort of gather and join our Zoom. So I want to just give a brief overview of this three-part series that we've created for faculty today. It's called Fabulous Foundation Fridays. And the purpose of these sessions is to introduce School of Education faculty and students to program officers from various foundations. And I'd like to welcome all of our guests today, including our speakers, whom we'll introduce in a few minutes. I'd also like to welcome anyone who's outside of the School of Education. And so for those I have not met yet, I'm Jen Katzbon-Contro, and I serve as the Associate Dean of Research here in the School of Education. So as I was alluding to earlier, we hope this session will allow faculty and students to learn about the great work of the Nsf Foundation through hearing about various program core missions, as well as perhaps a little bit about trends in funding goals and the opportunity to place a face with a name. That's always really huge. So we're featuring 8 education-focused programs overall across our program directors and program officers. And I'm going to serve as the moderator and program chair. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 4 short presentations. And at the beginning of each presentation, I'll do a brief bio introduction to each of the presenters. If you have a question, you can post it in the chat. And if we get to it, what I'll do is I'll scroll through and then reword the question or pose the question to the presenter. And if we do not get to your question, you can always follow up further individually via email or set up an appointment. So each program director or officer will present for approximately 10 to 12 minutes, and we're recording this for all of our friends and colleagues who are not able to join us today. And what I'm going to do is just scroll through for 1 second. Okay, wonderful. And I'm going to start with our first presenter. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Julie Johnson. She is Program Director in the Division on Research and Learning at the National Science Foundation, where she's worked since 2013. She works with the Advanced Informal STEM Learning, the AISL as it's popularly called, program, Innovative Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers, ITEST as it's popularly called, and the Faculty Early Career Development Career Program. Prior to coming to NSF, Johnson was a middle school science and math teacher. She's worked in museum education and has also served as Chief Operating Officer of an aquarium. She's experienced in performance assessment, creating organizational systems, program development, evaluation, group facilitation, and effective communication with diverse external stakeholders. So now what we'll do is I would invite Dr. Johnson to share her PowerPoint, and we'll transition to her presentation.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having us. I thought since I'm the first program director to go, I'd actually start by just giving an overview of NSF, because I don't know the extent to which everybody understands that. Then talk about AISL, give you a couple examples, and move on to the other presenters. So NSF was established in 1950 with this core mission. And as you may or may not know, every agency has a core charter mission that they are engaged in. And while agencies do strategic planning every 3 to 5 years or so, their base core mission rarely ever changes. Within the, I'll just say within the foundation, there are, I'll get this wrong, so one of my other colleagues can correct me. There are 8 directorates and the Office of the Director. Most of the directorates, except for EHR, have a science disciplinary focus. So EHR, the Education and Human Resources Directorate, is the one that's primarily focused on education, has 4 divisions, from Division of Research on Learning, which looks at K-12 education, looks at learning across the lifespan, Division of Undergraduate Education, Division of Graduate Education, and the Division for Human Resource Development, right? So this is just some information about the focus of the EHR Directorate. And then, as I said, the Directorate is broken into various divisions, and then those divisions have different programs, and you'll hear about some of those programs today. So the AISL program, Advancing Informal STEM Learning. So we're interested in moving things forward. While in the history of this division, we have at times funded the simple development of programs or supporting programs that exist. The focus more recently, meaning the last decade or two, really is about research on learning. In the AISL program, we are looking at learning across the lifespan. And so when I talk to people, I try to differentiate schooling from learning because learning can happen in a multitude of settings and contexts without particular constraints related to the schooling context. We focus our program and other programs in EHR focus on the STEM disciplines that NSF funds. This is of note because things like medicine, public health education would not be funded by NSF. We might look at the science behind something, but projects that would focus on medicine or health education, for example, could go to the to NIH, which also has an education-focused program. And then, as I said, we're looking at learning and learning across multiple contexts. We are not, when we think about, 2 to 92, we're looking at different features and aspects that supports learning. This is a rosette of how we are continuing to encapsulate and conceptualize what the informal STEM learning sectors or subsectors might look like. The ones in red are sort of the most known and historically known. I would say these are probably our bread and butter, kind of where we grew up. And as both how people engage in learning, who sees themselves participating in the learning landscape is evolving, so too does what it means to be in that space of informal STEM. So AISL has 6 priorities in our solicitation, which is noted at the bottom. The current one is 20-607. Each of these are, we have further detail about this, but we like to think about kind of the 5,000-foot level of the amalgam of the things that we fund and how people should think about their work should be along these strands. Now, it doesn't mean that every proposal has to meet every one of these priorities. There may be some that make more sense than others, but across the program, these are the kinds of things that we are interested in. So some examples tying back to each of those. This is a project that has been around for a bit. It started out with the Museum of Science in Boston and a partnership with local universities in the psychology and sociology students and programs to think about how a museum space might be a good naturalistic space for conducting psychology and sociology research. Over the decade plus of this project, it now boasts a membership of roughly 100 museums and university partnerships. A number of them, I think in this particular, very first project was really looking at young children. So it was child development and also had children's museums as part of it. But as I said, now there are a vast number of different university research partnerships. But thinking about the engagement of learning in a naturalistic space. In terms of knowledge building, again, thinking about the ways that we contribute to how people understand learning, how people understand the STEM disciplines, and their intersection with other disciplines. So This is a particular project that was really looking at how do we extend experiences and understanding of mathematics and their connection to art and art museums. Artists will, the way they talk about what they do and how they see things and how they approach the design process, bringing together color and texture, et cetera, has a lot of math principles in it. And so thinking about the ways that the arts can be part of moving forward the learning around math is part of this project. We also have things that are about promoting innovation. So as I said, one of the rosettes was about children's television and media. So we have quite a robust portfolio there. Quest is, there's actually 2 or 3 awards combined into this. But this is public television station out in California, and really looking at the engineering and design process and focusing on middle school children. So this was primarily started with a focus on young kids, middle school kids, thinking about ways to engage them online. Over time, they have also developed some materials that might be used in classrooms or in other kinds of settings. But this is one of those examples of thinking about early on, because this is actually an older project, thinking about the ways to capitalize on the virtual environment. Collaboration is another thing that we're really very focused on in terms of, to really bring together the people and entities needed to conduct the work that we want to fund, and really understanding learning requires partnership. So a lot of the proposals that we receive and the way that reviewers view these proposals is based in who is brought to the table, how are we engaging larger systems in the support of learning. Broadening participation is another piece. Broadening participation is an aspect of many things at NSF. We are particularly interested in thinking about broadening participation across that lifespan worth of learning. So this project was working with high school girls and actually also young women in the particular community setting around MIT, and thinking again about ways to engage young women in STEM, but through different modalities. And then in terms of strengthening infrastructure, our program as well as other programs at NSF and in the division have resource centers, which are part of our fabric of ways of supporting our PI community and others. In this instance, the CASE Resource Center that AISL supports is both doing outreach work for us in terms of helping us, if we'll go back to that rosette, how to connect people from the various sectors that might comprise ISE and bringing them together. It's also the informalscience.org website is both a clearinghouse of information and project descriptions and project resources, as well as a place for people who are not as familiar with what informal science learning is or who's involved to come and learn through there. And then in terms of being able to find stuff, the NSF website is a really big, mysterious thing. And so one of the things that I always want to say to people is, you can go and look at the search, look at on the homepage for the search, you can search awards, right? You can come to a landing page of a particular program or a division, and you can look up funding opportunities within a particular division or program. And finally, if you go to the home page of a program and you scroll down to the bottom, there you can find what has been funded, what's actively funded for a particular program. So that works for any program. And then finally, just as a public service announcement for all of the other resource centers in the division, you can use your QR code reader and go to the site of those divisions. So with that, I'm done.
That was wonderful. That was so informative to get a better feel for, I love that Rosette map, and you're talking about different modalities and a lot of interdisciplinary work, it seemed, from multiple domains. We have time for one question if anyone cares to post a question in the chat.
So there is a question in the chat about, do we fund things in after school? So the division, so yes, and a but. All right. After school and out of school programs, there are thousands of them. So we do not simply say, hey, yes, we'll fund another after school program. We are really asking people to think about, what do you want to understand about youth engagement, youth interest and learning around STEM? Right? How are you conceptualizing your after school experience as an informal STEM learning experience, and not necessarily the extension of the school day, right? Where are you looking to make your contributions to the literature? The other thing is that the iTest program, which I did not show you examples of, also funds out of school time and after school program. So what are the differences between the two? So as I said, AISL is really interested in understanding learning across the lifespan. Yes, we get a lot of proposals that are focused on young people, K to 12, because there's a lot of focus there. But we're also interested in young adults, older adults, seniors, etc. So in coming to the AISL program and to look at after school, we're interested in things like, so what are measures that can appropriately be used in the after school and out of school time space? How do we really understand the affordances and features of what needs to be occurring in those spaces that have different constraints than schooling? And people really need to be grounded in the larger arena of out of school and after school in order to submit a successful proposal. So there's a number of different programs in DRL that focus on that age cohort. And depending on what you ultimately want to do, where you ultimately want to make your contributions to learning, will help determine if it's AISL, iTest, or DRK12, or ECR.
All right, wonderful. So at this time, we're going to transition to our next presenter, Dr. Jolene K Jesse. So Dr. Jesse currently serves as Program Director in the Directorate for Education and Human Resources at the NSF. She's a team lead for the EHR Core Research Program. Previously, she was the first team lead and later co-lead for the NSF Includes initiative. For much of her career at NSF, Dr. Jesse served as Program Director for the Research on Gender in Science and Engineering program. She began her NSF career in the Cross-Directorate Activities Program in the Directorate for Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences. She has also worked across the foundation as part of numerous cross-directorate teams, as well as federal task forces, including the White House Council on Women and Girls. She holds a doctorate in political science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, a master's degree from American University, and a BA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So we shall say, Dr. Jesse, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm here to talk to you about the EHR Core Research Program, and I'm very grateful to my colleague to have framed this in terms of what NSF, how NSF is organized, so I don't have to go into all of those kinds of details. The EHR Core Research Program has been around since 2013. The solicitation number is 19-508. Here's just a screenshot of our solicitation when you open it up. And you'll see that it replaces 15-509. So if you are familiar with 15-509, we are now working on 19-508. And I'm going to give you the caveat that there is likely to be another solicitation update before the October deadline in 2021. So you're going to want to keep watching our website for that. One of the things that I want to point out to you is that the EHR Core Research Program is not embedded in a single one of our divisions, but it is embedded in all of our divisions. So the Division of Graduate Education, the Division of Undergraduate Education, the Division of Human Resource Development, and the Research on Learning in formal and informal settings. And that's very intentional. If and when you decide to submit a proposal to ECR, you will have to choose a division. And I'm going to tell you right now that it doesn't matter what division you choose. We're going to take that proposal and we're going to sort it how we want to sort it. And you don't have to worry about that, but you will have to choose a division. It's just a formality. We do have right now a due date of the first Thursday in October. This year it was October 1st. Next year, I'm not sure. Again, we will be updating the solicitation. So you're going to want to watch our website for the update for the ECR program. The ECR program follows the common guidelines for education, research, and development that was put out in 2013. It is a joint document between the Institute for Education Sciences in the Department of Education, as well as the NSF. If you've not seen this document or you've not looked at it, you really want to take a look at this particular document, because it lays out what we look at as the different kinds of different types of research that can be done in the education area. ECR particularly is in that foundational research space. So what do we mean? What do we mean by fundamental research? Because that's where ECR differs from the other programs in EHR. Although other programs will also fund fundamental research, ECR only funds fundamental research. So we are the place where curiosity-driven research has a home that expands knowledge in very specific knowledge areas. I always tell people, is ECR the right place for you? What's your research question? Because your research question is going to tell me what is the focus of your project. And for ECR, it's got to be some kind of fundamental knowledge, some kind of, I really want to understand how the brain works, or I really want to understand what self-efficacy looks like in this context, or I really want to understand how do we expand the pathway to a specific STEM career, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So it's curiosity driven. It is also based on really important research questions that are related to education or learning or broadening participation or workforce development across all the STEM fields. We cover all STEM fields with the caveat, as Julie said, of no health and no medicine. We don't do those. Those are NIH. We exclude those from our bailiwick. And then it's in ECR, it might have implications for policy and practice, but it doesn't have to have a direct implication for that. And that's really where we diverge from other programs in EHR, is that this is kind of very broad knowledge. It doesn't have to be specific to an intervention or a policy or a specific practice. It can have down the road implications for that. So we can be upstream, we can have those policy and practice implications, but it might be distal at the point that you're working. So ultimately, fundamental research is grounded in that theory or empirical framework. It identifies important constructs, whether those be new or developing across education, learning, and the different areas that ECR funds. It extends our understanding of current constructs. It can increase the understanding of relationships among those constructs, and it extends research or evaluation methodologies. So again, it's focused on a specific area of knowledge or concept that the field really needs more information about. So think if you're thinking you might be in that ECR realm, again, your research questions then are going to be around a concept, an area of knowledge that needs to be furthered rather than on a specific intervention development. So it's not an applied program, it is a basic research program. So the research, we have our topic areas that we cover are STEM learning and learning environments, broadening participation STEM, and STEM workforce development. But within that, we can cover any age of learner. Like AISL, we are one of the only programs at the foundation in the education space that covers, Julie said 2 through 92. I usually say pre-K through gray. You know, we cover that entire spectrum of learning. We can do any level of education. We can do any setting. It can be formal, it can be informal, it can be the technological world, especially now as we've had to work more in this kind of technology environment. It can involve assessments of learning. It can involve career pathways and transitions, emerging practices, different contexts, different workforce needs. It can look at learning, it can look at persistence, it can look at underrepresentation of particular groups in STEM. It can, but it always has a grounding in theory, but it can be any theory. It can be different kinds of techniques. It can incorporate different perspectives from a wide range of disciplines. As I said, we have our 3 research tracks, STEM learning and learning environments, broadening participation in STEM, and research in STEM workforce development, with the caveat that we know that these are very interconnected areas, but we do ask you to kind of situate your work in 1 or 2 of these. Don't send us a proposal that says, I'm working in track 1, 2, and 3, because it's hard for us then to, that doesn't differentiate it. But if you're specifically looking, for example, at a specific minority group in learning, or you're looking at gender, or you're probably situated in that broadening participation space. If you're looking at specifically at engineers, not engineering education, but engineers and how they learn across their life course, you're probably in that STEM workforce development space. You can also layer on underrepresentation on top of that. How do Black engineers learn in over the life course? You're going to cross over those 2. And then learning and learning environments. What is it about engineering education? For example, how curriculum and pedagogy, for example, might work or not work for specific groups in engineering education. Certainly, we see very different outcomes across engineering education and engineering disciplines, for example. That is all areas in which you might want to further knowledge. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, is we're all about furthering that knowledge. We have different funding levels and duration, and people always ask, well, what's the difference between a level 1 and a level 2? It's a big difference in terms of how much you ask. And I tell people all the time, it's what you decide based on the maturity of the work, the size and scope of the effort, and the capacity of your team to do the proposed research. That's what's in the solicitation. We have different levels because we want you to be able to find yourself in our solicitation. If we just said you could ask for $2.5 million over 5 years, we're not going to get a range of people seeing themselves in our solicitation. So we basically say, if you think you're at that level 1, ask for a level 1 amount of money. If you are at a level 2, you know, ask for that. If you really think you need $2.5 million to study because you're at that point where the research is mature enough that you need to be at a very large scale, then come in with that level 3. We also fund careers, and you're going to hear about that next, I believe. We fund syntheses and meta-analyses. If you want to do a meta-analysis, if you think your area of research is ready for a meta-analysis because there's enough research there to aggregate across findings, then absolutely we fund meta-analyses and meta-syntheses. We fund conferences, Igers, and Rapids. If you are interested in conferences, Igers, or Rapids, please contact a program officer and talk to them first. Just don't submit an Iger to us. That'll be returned without having previously discussed with a program officer. Some things to bear in mind is that ECR, we're multidisciplinary and our panels are multidisciplinary. So if you're going to come into ECR with a proposal, you're going to want to make sure that the contribution to specific literature is clear, but that it also talks about the contribution across fields, because there's probably people that are going to be reading your proposals and people who are going to be interested in your findings that cross multiple fields. So think about your particular work as being both embedded in your area, but also able to speak across disciplines. Nobody knows every literature, but you want to make sure that you understand that concepts such as self-efficacy or motivation really do cross fields and disciplines, and there's a broad literature on that, so you want to understand that as well as be specific enough for it. You have 15 pages to talk about your work, always, although for some programs you have more, but for ECR you have 15 pages, so you're going to want to be vague, but you're going to want to bring in an advisory board. All of these things are things that you're going to want to think about if you come in for an ECR proposal. And I wanted to point out that we have some Dear Colleague letters on the streets that is calling for specific research in very particular areas that are of interest to us. One is that fundamental discipline-based education research at the undergraduate level. So if you're looking at physics at the undergraduate level, we definitely want more research on that, or chemistry or biology, or engineering, computer science at that undergraduate level. We have a Dear Colleague letter that's calling for more research on STEM teaching and learning and workforce development for people with disabilities. We have one that is calling for more research on fundamental research on equity, inclusion, and ethics in post-secondary academic workplaces. So among faculty, postdocs, that kind of research is things that we're calling out. We also have one for STEM workforce development using flexible personal learning environments. Again, this notion that how does our workforce learn in these kind of more flexible technology environments as they progress through their careers. And then finally, we have one on developing and testing new methodologies for STEM learning research syntheses, and evaluation. And that's all I have. If you are thinking that you might have an idea for ECR, please send us a one-page description of your particular idea to ecr@nsf.gov. We have around 22 program officers that work with us. So I will then be able to connect you with a program officer in the specific areas of expertise in the area that you're interested in. So if you're interested in brain science, or you're interested in curriculum development or curriculum impact, or you're interested in broadening participation, or you're interested in workforce development, there's a program officer that would love to talk to you. Send us that one pager and I'll connect you with them. And that's all I have. So any questions?
Thank you so much. These are both wonderful presentations. So I wrote in the chat, does anyone have a question? Probably have time for 1 or 2 questions for each presentation. So let me just scan.
Again, one of the things I tell people all the time, if you don't know if you're going to go to AISL, for example, or to ECR, or to DRK12, or to IUs, the biggest way to get that answer is to send us your research questions, because we can tell from your research questions where you belong. So if you're not quite sure, you've got an idea, you can send it to me in ECR and I will pass it along to the next program officer in a different program if I think it's more appropriate. So one of the things that we very often get is people sending the idea to multiple program officers. You don't really need to do that. One is enough. You can send it to one of us. We know what our colleagues do and we can pass it along. So, but your research questions are probably the most important thing to send if you want to get that kind of advice.
So don't be shy and don't be vague. Be specific with your research question and don't be afraid to email and contact you.
Correct.
All right, wonderful. Let me check the chat one more time. Okay, great. All right, again, thank you, Dr. Johnson. Thank you, Dr. Jesse. We're on a roll. So these are great presentations and we have 2 more left. So we're gonna go to the next presentation. We have Dr. Margaret Hjalmarson, and she is a program director in the Division of Research on Learning in Formal and Informal Settings at Nsf. So with her background, she's worked on the Discovery Research Pre-K-12 program, the EHR Core Research Program, the Innovative Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers in the Career Program. Her focus is in mathematics education and engineering education in K-12 and undergraduate settings, with a particular interest in teaching, developing, and design-based research. So wonderful. And with that, I will hand it over to you.
Great. The first thing I'll reiterate, just because I don't know that people always believe us when we say it, is to call us and share your idea with us. Because one of the most important things, it's part of our job to help you make sure your proposal is going to the right place. And it makes me sad when I have to decline something because it got sent to the wrong program. So, you know, don't be afraid to send us your ideas and let us help you think through. The other thing is, like, I had a conversation with a PI, prospective PI, and I could say to her, oh, there's this program that sounds a lot like your work that she hadn't even heard about, right? So we can point you to things you might not know. So I'm talking a little bit about the career program. So the career program is a little bit different. That's our current solicitation number. And it's probably not up for revision for another couple of years, and it's been pretty stable for the last few. It's an NSF-wide program. So every single division, every single directorate can make career proposals. So the career solicitation is written with an eye towards anybody who's an assistant professor or equivalent kind of person. It is also unique in that it has a minimum budget, which sometimes is scary to people because they then go, well, then what's too much to ask for? What should I fund? What's your real budget? And the real budget, kind of like what Jolene was saying about the EHR Core Research Program, is, so tell us what kind of project you want to do and what are the resources that you need to be able to do that. So do you need graduate assistants? Do you need to pay teachers? Do you need to buy supplies? You know, whatever it is, within the guidelines of the National Science Foundation and the federal government, we can try to sort of pay for it to help you with that project. I would say the career proposals mostly come in about $800,000 to $1 million. That's kind of generally where they are. But we've funded more than that. We've funded projects at less than that. So it's really about, tell us what you need to do the project. And often the program officer will also work with you a little bit once we've decided we wanted to fund something, if we think you need more money or less money. The deadline is July 26th this summer. So you should probably start working on your career proposals soon because they take a while. Its major focus is to support the early development of academic careers and help support new PIs. Part of the intent of this is also that we don't want to just keep funding the same people over and over. So we have to help develop a new generation of researchers. So that's part of what the goal of the program is. Some unique features about it. One feature is that it's a single PI project. So in thinking about what you can do by yourself with maybe a postdoc, maybe some undergraduate or graduate research supporters. The other piece is you need to be an assistant professor at the tenure track or tenure track equivalent. And there's some language in the solicitation about what tenure track equivalent means. The other unique piece of it is that there's an integration of research and education plan, because as a faculty member and thinking about the mission of the National Science Foundation, which is both science and science education, sort of you bringing together what's the research you're doing, and then also how are you impacting the communities around you. And that might be via your teaching, it might be mentoring doctoral students, it might be a partnership with a science museum, could be all kinds of different things. The other unique feature about Career is that we don't have our own budget as a program. We are funded, each career proposal is funded by one of the other projects. So for example, things were submitted to the AISL program where there were early career people interested in informal science settings like Dr. Johnson was talking about. And so those come in, they don't get reviewed with the rest of the AISL things that come in, they get reviewed with the rest of the career proposals that come in. So it's a little bit unique in that the money comes from one of our regular programs, but the review happens with the career proposals by themselves. And so you'll have to select which of those you think is the best fit. And that's one reason to contact a program officer so they can help you think about if you're more like ECR or more like IUs or more like AISL. You can also identify a second program as well if you're not quite sure, or if you have something that's kind of boundary crossing in some way. These are a few links, and I can share this PowerPoint so everybody can have the links with everybody. An important thing about Career is also to, in preparing it, often people find it helpful to reach out to other career awardees. For example, Dr. Wright, your colleague at Drexel, who I think is on this meeting, is a career awardee, and not just a career awardee, but a Presidential Early Career Research Awardee, or PCASE award. The PCASE award is selected by the program officers in the White House from people who received the career award. So reaching out to people. The other thing a program officer can help you do is identify if there's somebody with a career award that on something similar or related, to help you think about who you might be able to reach out to if you're not sure. So that's the career program.
Okay, wonderful. So Dr. Hjalmarson, so if it's for tenure track assistant professors, do you recommend apply early in case, like early in your career or early in your post, so that you can resubmit based on feedback that you receive if you don't get it the first time?
Yeah, so you get up to 3 submissions, which is usually plenty by the time you've gotten through 6 years of going up for tenure, usually. I think we fund people at all along that range. It is a good idea to sort of strategize being able to submit it once and knowing that you might need to submit it again, though. So give yourself that time. On the other piece of it, though, is we also look at your career as a trajectory. So if you need a year to do some initial work or test some things out that would help make it a stronger proposal, that can also be helpful if you need a year or two to in your position to do some of that prior work.
And so
All right,
I would
wonderful.
add, this is a case where, you know, even reaching out to a program officer to have a conversation, because that conversation may help you determine, are you going to submit this July, or are you going to wait and submit in July of 22? But you'll sort of start to build a plan.
Yep. And the scoping, I think, is also important. The other thing, like, for example, in my own personal career, I had a collaboration with an engineer that I worked with all the time. And so the work I did just wasn't a good fit for career because it wasn't a one PI project. So that's the other thing to think about. Is it right for the regular solicitation, or should you submit to career? We also have a new program that I'll say I don't know much about, called the Mid-Career Advancement Program, which is basically career for associate professors. So none of us know very much about it because it's brand new. But you know, if you're an associate professor, and having been an associate professor, sometimes you feel like there's a bunch of assistant professor opportunities and there's a bunch of full professor opportunities. So we're trying to fill that gap of people who work on that.
Good to know. We did see that solicitation. We passed it around to our faculty.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to encourage that as well as the career.
Yep. Yeah.
Wonderful. Are there any questions? I don't have any in the chat, but I'm just double checking. All right. So if not now, you can always follow up. We will transition to our last presenter. Thanks so much, Dr. Hjalmarson. And so our last presenter is Dr. John Weichenpaul. He is a program officer in the Division of Graduate Education in the EHR Directorate, where he oversees the Ige, well, at least that's how I pronounce it, the IGERT, the Nrt and the IGE programs. He is an IPA rotator from the University of Central Florida, where he's a senior associate dean in the College of Graduate Studies, and as well a professor of biology.
Thank you, Jen. Everyone see the screen okay? Good, thumbs up, perfect. All right, I'm going to talk to you about two programs. I'm one of three program officers involved in them. As was mentioned in prior presentations, you know, certainly feel free to contact any of us, Daniel, Vinod, or me if you have any questions. So, you know, though we consider the, you know, graduate education in the United States as kind of the gold standard across the world, you know, like the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland, the US needs to keep running or evolving basically to stay in the same place. And so as noted by, you know, some of these publications, you know, there's always room for improvement in grad ed in the US. If we look at NSF funding, you know, about $1 billion goes to graduate students each year. The majority of that is in the form of research grants awarded to science and engineering research projects, where the PI will then distribute it to a graduate research assistant. The 5% slice of the pie largely represents the Nrt program. And we can look at the Nrt program, which hopefully is on the verge of increasing to about 60 million, but it's divided into two programs. One is kind of a smaller program focusing on research questions related to grad ed. The other one is the larger program is the Nrt, the NSF Research Traineeship Program. So I'm going to describe these separately. The IGE program is really trying to identify those proposals that explore ways for graduate students in STEM, master's and doctoral programs to develop the skills, knowledge, and competencies needed to pursue a range of STEM careers. The latest solicitation includes professional science masters as well. We just as of Wednesday, we finished our review panels for this fiscal year 21 cycle. And what you see here is that the next call for proposals won't be till March 25, 2022. We're flip-flopping the Nrt cycle and the Ige, so there's a little bit of a longer period for the Ige coming up. The Ige portfolio consists of 6 years of operation of Ige. It has 51 active projects crossing 30 states. We can see some of the words that are coming out. You can see professional science, enhancing STEM, development training. These kind of represent all the titles of the Ige projects. Kind of more specifically, a few examples of Ige Awards are listed here. The first one's coming out of Northern Arizona. The question that they're going after is, how are we able to bring in the expertise from multiple universities involving University of Massachusetts, Penn State, Texas Tech, and Northern Arizona to focus on a particular type of degree program. And this is focusing on wind energy. And so trying to overcome the barriers, how can we learn from this consortium to overcome the barriers associated with different institutions so that we're able to provide a breadth of expertise to graduate students. The next project is coming out of Eastern Michigan. One of the issues that has been identified as a weakness in grad ed is mentoring. And this project teaches graduate students how to be good mentors. And through that knowledge, we're hoping that they understand what they need to provide themselves with a strong network of mentors. The next project is coming out of UNC Charlotte. Now, if you envision, doctorate programs in STEM, these are typically, research-oriented programs where, every chapter relates to some type of research question that's being pursued. And what they're doing at UNC Charlotte is trying to integrate patents into their degree program. Could a patent application, substitute for a research chapter in your dissertation? The next one is coming out of the University of Georgia. Nsf is really trying to promote open science, so it's available to everyone. And this Ige is coming up with methodologies that universities can incorporate to facilitate and promote open science and STEM education. And the last one coming out of the University of Colorado is trying to develop a system where science and engineering majors outside of data science will receive data science education so that they can be mentors in their different disciplines. An example of an Ige here is coming out of Florida State. What Dr. K is trying to do is improve classroom teaching skills. The FSU Ige uses simulations to help teaching assistants provide instruction in a variety of scenarios. The Ige coming out of your institution, SURGE is training graduate STEM students to be creative, innovative problem solvers. This follows evidence-based pedagogies from interdisciplinary team-based research. The Nrt program is the successor to the IGERT, which is the Integrated Graduate Research Traineeship Program. This was a long-standing program at NSF, but it was focusing strictly on doctoral students. The Nrt is a little bit broader, but some of the goals are still the same. The idea about the Nrt is that there are avenues that are difficult, research avenues that are difficult to pursue under current university operations, you know, the ones that kind of fall between the cracks. And so the idea is that this will fund interdisciplinary traineeships that will hopefully promote institutional change that fulfill noted workforce gaps, you know, in science and engineering. Doing the word cloud of the Nrt titles. They've been around 7 years. We have 102 active projects. What we see, which differs a little bit from the IGE, where the IG is really focusing on those, you know, particular research questions relating to grad ed. The Nrt is really blending science and engineering research with education research, or at least what's at the forefront of grad ed education research, so that our science and engineering trainees are not only receiving knowledge that's about the forefront of science and engineering, but they're being trained in new methodologies. And also the Nrts tend to explore new methodologies to benefit graduate trainees. So we can think about some of the components of an Nrt. You know, these are kind of the building blocks that come into play. Research and training work together to promote institutional change. What needs to happen with an Nrt is it has to cross academic silos. You know, we want to move towards those interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, or convergent areas of research where problems are being solved. And so these tend to be the more complex problems that involve multiple disciplines that need to come together, and in some cases create a new language, a new way of thinking in order to solve some of the problems out there. So we want to move kind of across to the right end of the spectrum. It's required for Nrt to identify key questions that are at the forefront of science and engineering. Now, over the years, we have identified certain priority areas. NSF has their own, and the Nrt program adopts these high priority areas. However, we always encourage PIs to come up with their own areas of interest. They need to be interdisciplinary in nature, and the PIs will need to explain why they consider those to be priority areas. And so just kind of going through these historically, DESE is data-enabled science and engineering. Infuse is innovations at the nexus of food, energy, water systems. UTB's understanding the brain. DESE kind of evolved into HDR, harnessing the data revolution. And these are now in the 2019, 2020, as well as to 2021. These are what are also called the NSF big ideas. And the 6 big ideas are considered to be the research ideas. So FW is the future of work at the human technology frontier. Windows on the universe is an astronomy kind of a big idea. Understanding the rules of life focuses more on genetics from the genome to the phenome. NNA is navigating the new Arctic. QL is quantum leap. We've added a couple priority areas for 2021, AI, artificial intelligence, and then QISC, which relates a little bit to quantum leap. It's quantum information science and engineering. These priority areas, they occasionally we can get co-funding from some of these on occasion, which helps support the Nrt programs. Now, if we look at all the awards, what we find is that 2/3 of the awards fall into those priority areas, but about 1/3 of the awards are ideas that PIs have come up with on their own. And we always want to encourage that, because we don't want you to just be restricted to what NSF determines to be a big idea or a high priority area. And we really rely on the creativity of PIs to identify those interdisciplinary areas that represent research needs or workforce gaps out there. These are the 6 science and engineering directorates that Julie mentioned or described when she's going over the NSF hierarchy. We have Geo, Geology, Bio, SBE is Social Behavioral Economics, Science is Computer Information, Engineering is ENG, and MPS is Math. Physics, maybe it's Math, Physics, and, I don't know, Math and Physical Sciences perhaps. But what we see with the Nrts is that all of the Nrts involve at least 2 of these science and engineering directorates. The average is a little over 3, and this doesn't even include EHR, which is the directorate that we all represent. So EHR, Education Human Resources, has their hand in all these as graduate education is being advanced through these Nrts, as well as it is in the IGE. As part of the training, the idea is that we want to train students more broadly in graduate education. So there's the T-shaped training model. I went to a presentation a few years ago at the Council of Graduate Schools, and they were talking about pie-shaped models. And I don't know if it was lunchtime or whatever, but this is how I envisioned it. I thought, oh, pie shape, something like a T shape, I thought. But then I thought about it a little bit more and said, no, they're talking about pie like this. And so the idea is that students gain depth in multiple, in this case, only 2 examples of disciplinary areas, and then also have a breadth of knowledge that allows them to cross those disciplines, but also apply their skills to other areas that could relate to career diversity. Now, the latest way of thinking is that maybe we have to actually think of a comb-shaped training model, where doctoral students or master's students have a depth of understanding in a variety of science and engineering domains, but then have the professional skills and the breadth of knowledge perhaps related to team science and communication that enables them to cross those domains and apply their depth of knowledge more broadly. Because what we know about graduate education is that what used to be the model perhaps 20 or more years ago, where what happens in graduate education is that you're being recruited to replace your graduate advisor. That's no longer the case. Most of our graduates don't end up in academia. Even our doctoral students, about less than 50% end up in academia, and when we look at the master's level, that's significantly less. Less than maybe 30% end up in academia. So we really want to be able to train our students more broadly so that they are able to basically fit into a variety of careers out there. And this relates to part of the professional skill development that occurs in Nrts. This chart represents primary or secondary work activities of recent doctoral graduates across a variety of sectors. Now, certainly they're still involved in basic and applied research, but also we see that they may be involved in other things. They may have management and sales experiences that they're involved with. Some are involved with teaching. So this tells us that we need to broaden our training models to include other types of skill development that's appropriate for our doctoral students, as well as our master's students. A couple of examples of Nrts. These all have a Florida flavor because I gave recently a presentation to a Florida research group. But what you see here, this is coming out of USF, there's kind of those two components that are working together for the Nrt. This one coming out of USF, as I mentioned, is falling within the FUSE priority area, focusing on coastal food, energy, and water systems. We see it involves engineering, oceanography, geosciences. The research efforts may involve the impact associated with water management along the coast, as well as other activities that occur along the coast, like ecotourism, and how that can affect these complex systems. The students or trainees that are involved, they have a focus on systems thinking to address challenges. They have international field experiences, and they have a focus on also developing social media communication skills. A recent award from last year coming out of FAU is focusing on using data science and artificial intelligence to address medical questions, as well as a variety of other issues, such as detecting changes in older drivers, which relate to designing sensors placed in vehicles and applying data analytics to analyze behaviors. Because students are drawn from a variety of disciplines, it's often necessary to basically bring them all up to a comparable level, so they can all understand some of the data analytics that are at the forefront of that field. Students are involved in project-based learning, which involves team science and communications, so they're able to solve some of these complex problems. Now, one question, and is apparent, is how do we know if our Nrt model is working? Both the Ige programs and the Nrt programs require, evaluation. With the Ige, since it is kind of a test, certainly we want to understand whether or not it's working. With the Nrt, students are considered to be human subjects. And so they're assessed during the course of their tenure in the Nrt to understand whether or not the objectives of the Nrt are being obtained. And so there is kind of this, persistent formative assessment that occurs with the trainees. And what we find is because of this regular evaluation, the Nrts tend to pivot a little bit over the course of their award. And the students are empowered to determine the direction that the Nrt takes. So if we look at the Nrt, some of the key features, they are representing interdisciplinary towards convergent research. They are developing new models of graduate education with the goal to foster institutional change. And this may come about through developing a more interdisciplinary kind of division in graduate education. Hopefully universities, see or understand the value of this. Peer mentoring, as well as mentoring across different disciplines, is often a component. We, as part of both the Ige and the Nrt, we hope to broaden participation in science and engineering through these programs. And so we always look to make sure that we have recruiting models that are trying to bring in students who maybe historically have been underrepresented, and then also to ensure that they're able to obtain the knowledge and move towards graduation. The training is supposed to be broad, going towards that comb-shaped model, so that there are a variety of non-academic careers that these graduates pursue. And because we have this regular assessment process, we're able to inform and improve the Nrt programs over the course of the years that they're in operation. The upcoming deadline is February 25th. We have a series of question and answer webinars. Our first one will be this afternoon. If you go to the Nrt website, you'll be able to see them. And because we are kind of switching, this is the last spring competition, at least in the near future. The next few years will be a fall competition. So this cycle, we have two proposal submission deadlines, February 25th and then September 6th. And that's what I have for the presentations about Ige, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for all those slides and all the information with the examples of various training models and different institutional examples as well. At this time, do we have any questions for Dr. Weishampel? And any other closing questions? Let me check real quickly. You know, some people peeled off due to other commitments. So we got a lot of feedback in the chat that the presentations were really informative and really helpful. It looks like we do have one question that just popped up. So let me just read it out loud. So for the Nrts, do they need to be focused on a specific theme?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. You know, each Nrt has a particular science and engineering theme that they'll be focusing on. They don't need to be coming out of the high priority areas that NSF has designated. But what we want to happen through the Nrt is that you have a cohort of trainees that all are kind of involved with comparable questions, or at least overlapping questions. So there's a degree of synergy that can occur to really address a noted problem in science and engineering that's, you know, represents the forefront of research and potential workforce gap. So I see the follow-up question from Lila. So the question is, does this presuppose faculty coherence within departments or across an institution? You know, certainly it's desirable that these faculty, you know, have a certain degree of familiarity with the other faculty work. And, you know, through this Nrt, they'll be working together in order to develop this traineeship that does cross disciplines, then addresses problems that crosses those particular academic silos. So if there is a history of faculty working together, certainly that can be an important component in the review process if the panelists see that, you know, they have worked together towards solving these problems and pushing research.
Right, great, wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to do one last thank you and let you know that we are so happy we're able to gather all of you together in one presentation, because it's really nice, I think, for people learning about the programs to compare and to contrast. Sorry, John, did you say?
Yeah, I want to make one more thing.
You want to say?
Yeah, one more
Okay.
comment, and this is, I think, an important thing to consider. And I know Jen has had this opportunity. If you want to really learn more about the process, it'll be valuable for you to, volunteer to serve on a panel. You really get a better understanding in terms of the mechanisms that are taking place, and understand how a panel works to vet the proposals out there.
So I was gonna, I was going to add that public service announcement as well. So that is absolutely one way to get a better sense of a particular program in NSF. The second public service announcement, we focused on the solicitations specific to a particular program. You should also make the PAPPG, the proposal and award management, the NSF 20-1, 21-1. You should make that good reading, put it on your nighttime stand, mark it up, put bookmarks in it. It has a lot of information in it. And part of the reason I'm saying this right now is we have a deadline in a couple of weeks, and every question I've answered this week, it's like, did you read the PAPPG? Did you read the PAPPG? So there are actually a couple of documents you should look at when you are submitting to any program at NSF. It's the solicitation of the program you're submitting to and that PAPPG document. So make that your friend, cozy up with it, and volunteer to be a reviewer.
Some good holiday activities and reading. All right, thank you so much. We're going to close out the presentation for today, but I just want to remind everyone, because I had a lot of questions in the chat, that Zoom automatically gives me a cloud recording, and our Director of Marketing has graciously agreed to continue posting those on the School of Education Research webpage, and so those will be accessible to everyone. And then we will also request PowerPoints. I already have Dr. Jesse's because she had to leave. But I can collect those PowerPoints as well, and we can disseminate those as well. So thank you once again. We'll be in touch, and stay tuned for more Fabulous Foundation Fridays, and have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone. Take care, and happy holidays.